Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and in today's video we'll be doing the very first impressions of what Rogue is like to play on the alpha. Now there's a couple of caveats to this. This is not a finalized product. There's good things, a lot of things are going to change by the time this comes out to live. We also are playing on level 50 characters, so not on max level, and at the time of recording, not a lot of Covenant abilities are unlocked yet. Hell, we don't have most of the zones that we can visit. So, just take a look at the bare bones, what a class is looking like, and how do they play currently with the very basics in Shadowlands. And I'm probably going to end up repeating myself multiple times as I do this for multiple classes. But today we'll be diving onto Rogue. This is the class I've played for the longest, and I feel like I've got to know it fairly okay in Shadowlands. I feel like there's so much more to explore. That's why I'm going to say I've got to know it fairly okay, because there's so many more different builds that you can try. Let's take a look at what's new for Rogues. We'll start with Assassination, and we'll move on to Outlaw and Subtlety, just because they are all in alphabetical view. So Rogues are going to be a little different. You have first now a Rogue bar, which is going to have all the Rogue abilities. These are going to be a lot of the shared abilities between specs, and then you'll have spec-specific abilities as well as passives. So take a look at a Rogue in general. You have Cheap Shot, Cloak of Shadows, Crimson Vial, which is slightly nerfed. 20 energy for 20% of your maximum health over 4 seconds, so it's a smaller heal, but faster heal back, so only 4 seconds for you to get that 20%. That's going to make Outlaw a little bit stronger for the actual healing increase. You also have Envenom, Faint, Kick, Mutilate, all that's nice and good. Lockpicking, Poisons. Poisons are back for all 3 specs of Rogue. For Assassination, you have Deadly Poison, which is going to do exactly what Deadly Poison does. You also have Crippling Poison, Wound Poison, and Numbing Poison. Apparently Numbing and Crippling can stack right now in the alpha. Not sure if that's going to continue, but it does amplify another ability because you're able to stack both of them. I wonder if this is intended or not. However, it would give Rogues a lot of utility to work for. Outside of that, we have Shroud still, Sprint, Stealth, Tricks, Vanish, so nothing out of the ordinary. Moving on to Assassination, you get Ambush back as an opener, rewards 2 combo points. I guess I should mention also that Cheap Shot rewards 1 combo point. Pretty sure that's just done for PvP purposes. But Ambush rewards 2 combo points. You have Blind, Distract, Evasion, Phantom Knives, Garrote, Kidney Shot, Poison, Knife. I mean, all the abilities are still here for Assass. And then there's Shiv. Shiv made a comeback to the game, and how does Shiv function? It's basically Toxic Blade, at least for Assassination. What it does is it will do very low damage. It's 25-second cooldown, very low energy, rewards 1 combo point. And what it does is it applies a concentrated form of your non-lethal poisons. So, because of Crippling Poison, we do 70% slow reduction or on an enemy. Numbing Poison dispels all enrage effects. So, we basically can do this in Mythic Pluses if we want to. For Assassination, your nature damage against the target are increased by 20% for 9 seconds. That's just an Assassination only thing since you're the master of poisons. But every spec of Rogue has poisons and Shiv, and it functions to them basically the same. Moving on, we have Slice and Dice. So that's a new ability we haven't seen in a while for Assassination. It's been quite a bit. When did they remove Slice and Dice? I remember we didn't have it in Legion, did not have it in BFA. Might have, maybe not had it in WoD. I'm not sure anymore, but Slice and Dice is back as an extra ability for you to manage. So not only do you have bleeds to manage on the enemy, you also have a buff to manage for yourself. Vendetta comes back as well. It has an energy regeneration affect to it because Legion had an ability for Vendetta to generate energy, so did BFA, so they just brought it and made it baseline into the spec. And I believe all these other passives are exactly the same as they were, if I'm correct. But that's going to be everything we have for Assassination. Take a look at the talents. We have slight adjustments. Master Poisoner, Elaborate Planning are the same, but Blindside now works with your ambush. Military has a 20% chance to make your next ambush free and usable without stealth. Chance increased to 40% if the target is under 35. So ambush playstyle feels great. Honestly, having this ability as a free ability for 2 combo points is awesome. It does a lot of damage. The fact that it doesn't cost energy if it's procced is great, and I feel like it just speeds up the Assassination playstyle. And I think we'll just slot this in for now when we show off some gameplay. Level 25, Night Stalker, Subterfuge, and Master Assassin are all the same. Vigor in level 30 with Deeper Strat and Mark for Death are all the same. Same thing for level 35. We got Leeching, Cheat, Death, Elusiveness. 40, we got Internal Bleeding, Iron Wire, and Praying Weak are all exactly the same. Level 45, Venom Rush. We have Alacrity for extra haste, which is different because that's where Toxic Blade used to be. and we still have exsanguinate, we'll just play with Alacrity just for the extra haste. It's like with the... Oh, by the way, numbers are very little in Shadowlands. Yeah, so Mutilate hits for 264 or 261. Envenom can hit for 690. I'm pretty sure these numbers are going to be a little bit higher when we get to max level, but when they squish this to level 50, they really squish everything. So the numbers are going to be all very, very tiny, which I'm not against, honestly. I'm okay with them squishing numbers even further. I feel like item level squish, number squish, and level squish just makes sense. Anyway, moving on to level 45, we did Alacrity, level 50 Poison Bomb, Hidden Blades, and Crimson Tempest got buffed, but I mean, with these numbers, like, you wouldn't be able to tell anyway. So that's going to be Assassination. So how does this spec play? So the basics of the spec are going to be actually quite interesting. So we have this automatons here in this area, if you find it, on Bastion, in case you're on Alpha. Right here, there's a bunch of these guys in there, more or less good training dummies. They will hit you back a little, but the damage they'll do is very, very small. So while this warrior tanks them, I can show you. I can ambush the enemy off the bat to build up comm points. We can build up Garrode, Rupture, and then we need to build comm points for Slice and Dice. And then we have the basics of Assassination. From there, essentially, we want to build comm points with Mutilate or free ambushes, and then hit Envenom whenever possible. Before we go for big damage, we can also apply Shiv on the enemy. But the rest of the, most of the gameplay is going to end up being you just attacking the enemy and maintaining all your buffs and hitting Envenom whenever you don't need to reapply any of your bleeds. And that's essentially the spec of Assassination. And I guess you could just take it and apply more dots on enemies as well. So the dot-based gameplay is quite nice. And that's the basics of Assass. What's weird about Assass, though, is there's a pandemic feature for all your dots, right? So if you, let's say, you have a full 5 component Rupture on an enemy, this guy's gonna die very, very soon, so you should try it honestly on a different enemy. Like this man right here has a full Rupture. It lasts 24 seconds. At 5 comm points, it's a 24-second Rupture. But if you spend extra comm points into a Rupture, you can extend it into like 32 seconds. So let's say you have Rupture left over with like 6 seconds left. You could take those 6 seconds into a full 24-second Rupture, so you don't lose any value on that Rupture. This type of pandemic effect works for Rupture, it works for Garrode, but it does not work for Slice and Dice. So if, let's say, you have a couple seconds on Slice and Dice and you refresh it at 5 comm points, it will still give you 36 seconds of the buff. So essentially, with Slice and Dice, you want to try to kind of refresh Slice and Dice, like I'm going to pop Slice and Dice. At the end of those 17 seconds, you want to try to refresh Slice and Dice then. I'm going to try to make sure to get my damage rolling. And because you won't be able to get any value off of Slice and Dice if you were to, like, let's say, refresh it right before it's about to fall off. Look, 4 seconds, 3 seconds, 2 seconds. Essentially, you want to try to, as soon as it falls off, refresh it. And that might make a big change to the gameplay. Maybe Blizzard will add Slice and Dice to that pandemic window to make it easier to maintain that buff in the future. But for now, that's just what we have to work with. Either way, it's really not terrible, and it actually plays quite well with the spec. So let me show you what the playstyle of the spec looks like if we were to like burst something down like Epilon. I do have a bit of comm points stacked up from earlier, but that's okay. We're going to open up with an ambush, get our dots up and running. We're going to try to get our full Slice and Dice rolling too. We want to get Slice and Dice rolling before Vendetta. Big Vendetta for the big energy. We're going to ambush for 2 comm points, Shift for 5 to get 5 comm points, and then try to dump as many Envenoms into this enemy as possible. Assassination still has that massive burst damage, and that's something it will retain, I think, for all of Shadowlands, unless Blizzard decides to change the spec completely. So now we just have an extra buff for us to maintain, but for the most part, as long as you have a full Slice and Dice rolling before you go for the big Vendetta windows, you'll be fine. Shiv also has a fairly short cooldown, generates a comm point, so it's part of your basic gameplay, which I very much like. If anything, I would say Assassination is more base spec of rogues. It's always going to have all that extra, I guess, all the basic abilities that you would expect for Assassination. Bit of bleeds, bit of burst damage, you have enough, plenty CC, and you're just kind of the most balanced version of the spec. You have burst as well as sustain, and the bleeds and poisons and physical damage, I think, all make it a very solid spec. Moving on to the Outlaw Rogue, it is far, far different, and that's probably going to be a lot more to go into when it comes to Outlaw, but I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. So Outlaw has most of the same abilities when it comes to all the rogue abilities, but then there's poisons. You have instant poison, you can do crippling poison, and you can do mind numbing. I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to be able to do crippling and mind numb together, but it makes Shiv super, super strong. Also, you need to switch up to the right weapons. Don't worry, poisons don't stick with weapons, like a buff that you maintain. That'll be Shamans, where the certain buffs stay to certain weapons. For Outlaw, we still have a Adrenaline Rush ambush. Between the eyes got changed, though. Between the Eyes is a 45-second cooldown. It still has that ability where if it crits, it does more damage, but now it puts a debuff on the enemy. Finish a move that deals damage with your pistol shot, increasing your critical strike chance and critical strike damage against the target by 20%. So, as you are able to, I guess, kite an enemy around with a pistol shot, able to put a pretty massive debuff on them that lasts longer per comp point spent. This is the debuff. Between the Eyes, critical strike damage taken from organs increased by 20, but also increases your crit chance. So, it's quite big. It's basically your Colossus Smash if you ever played Warrior, or if you play as Sub-Rogue before. It's like your Find Weakness buff. It is that moment for you to do extra bit of damage to an enemy. And it has a fairly long cooldown, but it does have cooldown reduction thanks to Restless Blades. There's going to be a lot of abilities on Restless Blades, but let's get back to Between the Eyes. So that no longer has a stun, as you notice, right? You no longer stun. That's going to be why Kidney Shot is making a comeback. That's probably to balance Outlaw for PvP to make it more like every other rogue spec. From there, we also have Blade Flare. Blade Flare has a 30-second cooldown, no charges, 15 energy, and only hits 4 enemies. There's actually a lot of abilities that are AoE focused in Shadowlands that have a cap on how many people they want to hit. Those are ones to specialize certain specs and being able to deal with 4 enemies, 5 or more. So certain specs that, let's say, do damage to 4 enemies, they'll be the most efficient at those 4. Specs that do really efficient damage to 8 enemies, they'll do the most efficient there. But basically, each spec will have their own strains depending on how many enemies you pull. But essentially, they want to take away like the Mythic Plus big AoE pulls out of the game, which I don't really know if that's a good idea or not, but I guess it's a controversial choice. This ability doesn't have charges, but it also plays off of cooldown reduction, so I use it. And as you can see, as I spend my comp points, it goes from a 20-second cooldown down to 13. From like, what, 18, 19 that I had just now? We're going to build comp points, 9 down to 3. So essentially, if you're, let's say, Adrenaline Rush to get yourself a lot of comp points, say I'm going to pop myself Blade Flurry and try to get through as many comp points as possible. I still have it up for 6 more seconds. Can I get extra comp points, please? Hopefully. Okay, so as it falls off, I have 3 seconds left before it's back up. So essentially, as Outlaw, you can have almost near perfect uptime if you have enough stats and if you have haste. So maybe like a haste crit build that plays together with Between the Eyes crit buff, and then haste build that lets you get more comp points and more finishes for Blade Flurry. Might be something worth considering in the future for Outlaw, but it actually does create like a little bit, the faster you play, the faster you get your abilities back, the more damage you do type of a mechanic, which I think is interesting. It's a definitely interesting change for Shadowlands, and I did not expect for Blizzard to go this route with Outlaw, but it's not terrible. I feel like it has potential. Dispatch is still there, Distract is there, Evasion comes back instead of Parry. So we might be able to see Parry in the future, but Blizzard wants to redesign it as another maybe strong defensive. Gouge is still in the game, still the only spec with Gouge. Grapple Hook is here, and you can make it grapple faster, so you can really cover distances a lot easier. The Shot comes back in its full glory. Gun Spree is a talent, so we're not going to cover it. Pistol Shot has a 30% slow, so if you slow somebody with crippling poison, it's better than Pistol Shot, but you can still kite. Roll the Bones. You maintain Roll the Bones. Slice and Dice also comes back. For Outlaw, they decided to balance the spec. You're going to have Slice and Dice for the base buff for you to do, and then Roll the Bones is an extra enhancement for you to do extra damage. It's essentially like rolling a 2 buff, because Slice and Dice is very similar to the Grand Melee buff. If you guys remember Grand Melee for Rogues, for Outlaw, it's basically just an auto attack buff. You just put it on, and it was really, really good at the very beginning of the expansion, because auto attacks were everything. But now you can use Roll the Bones for 50 energy to roll yourself a 30-second extra buffs, and even up to 2. You can roll Ruthless Precision, which has all the same benefits, which will make you Between the Eyes do more damage, and now you're more likely to crit, and those crits are doing far more damage, so you really are just blasting the enemy. And then Burn Charge will give you extra energy regen. Also, as you can see, Roll the Bones benefits from the cooldown reduction as you spend finishers. You can get this ability back faster. So let's say as your buff are about to run out, I'm going to get myself a full new Slice and Dice, let me get myself a heal. Got myself a full heal. Buffs. Hey, roll myself a buff. You always have the auto attack buff in order to make the spec shine. And then Roll the Bones provides an extra augmentation to it. Now, there are actually a lot of... there's one big change to Roll the Bones that happened with Outlaw. I don't really want to try hitting enemy train dummies until I get to show you, but there's one buff that actually gets changed quite heavily. The rest of the buffs, for the most part, stay. I don't know if it's possible to get a 5 buff, but I would think it's likely, but I haven't been able to roll one. The one buff that I'm looking for is not Skull and Crossbones, even though that's a good buff either way. Let me get more finishers in here and pop a self-heal if possible, as this enemy is just getting decimated completely. I need myself another roll of the bones. It is quite heavy on energy. It's 50 energy, 45-second cooldown, 30 seconds of a random buff. But if we can grab the buff, there we go. Grab melee. Gain 2 seconds of slice and dice per common point spent. So as you spend common points on an enemy, right, to use any abilities like you use in your Between the Eyes or using your Dispatch, every time you spend those common points, you actually get back your slice and dice back. So essentially, you don't have to maintain slice and dice at all if you get this buff. So essentially, you spend more time hitting the enemy, more time using run-throughs, more time using Between the Eyes and anything that's offensive and damage for you. And slice and dice just kind of maintains itself, which is a very interesting interaction. I'm going to get a roll the bones again. We got a backup and cooldown reduction, which is even nuttier, because we'll be able to use a lot more of our abilities. We get Adrenaline Rush rolling, so we can get a lot more common points up and running, get a bunch of dispatches onto the enemy, get our Between the Eyes back up for the debuff, so we can use that a lot more often. So it's like you still have this craziness of Outlaw, of Battle for Azeroth with buffs, while always having slice and dice to kind of ground you at the same time. Which might work out for the spec. The fact that we do more auto attacks and those auto attacks can proc and nature damage to it might make the spec more sustained, no matter what buff you have. Like, of course, you'll have really good rolls and you'll do more damage, and other times you won't do those rolls, but you'll still do good sustained damage. Look, my slice and dice actually had almost a 2-minute uptime. You can actually get your slice and dice to be 2-minute uptime at some point, so that is a crazy, crazy interaction with the spec. What else is different? We have Shiv, which also does the same thing as the other rogues. Sinister Strike, same. We have ourselves Combat Potency, Fleet-Footed, everything else is the same. So yeah, so this spec is looking pretty nuts. For talents, we have ourselves mostly the same in the first row. Then we have in the second row Night Stalker together with Retractable Hook, which is a little different. Grapple Hook is now 45-second cooldown baseline because everybody loves Grapple Hook, and most people go Retractable Hook because it's so nice. So this will reduce it down to 30 seconds, but baseline is 45. So even shorter cooldown overall because of all this cooldown reduction mechanics that Outlaw has, together with Hit and Run. I guess Night Stalker is a pretty decent choice here. They did take away Acrobatic Strike, so no longer do you have that extra reach in your abilities, which sucks, but none of the rogues have that reach, which I guess makes it fair. You have level 30 with Vigor, Deeper Strat, Mark for Death, so all the same. You have level 35 with Iron Stomach, Cheat Death, and Elusiveness. I guess in a sense, Iron Stomach is better since Crimson Valley heals for less now, so Outlaw has the most healing in the game. 40 has Dirty Tricks, Blinding Powder, and Prey in the Weak has the same. Level 45, Loaded Dice, Alacrity, and a hidden Coming Soon talent. We'll see what that's going to be, hopefully, in the future. Level 50 is Dance and Steel, Blade Rush, and Killing Spree. Killing Spree has a cap on how many enemies it can hit, by the way. It has only 4 enemies that it can hit with while Blade Flurry is up. I don't know if Blade Rush has that cap, but I wouldn't be surprised if it does. Lots of classes now have a cap on how much AoE they do. So Outlaw didn't get nerfed in that regard. It's really just everybody got nerfed in that sense. So what else can you really say about it? And lastly, we have ourselves Sub-Rogue. Sub-Rogue took quite a bit of changes in this update. It's somewhat similar to what you remember Sub-Rogue, but it is also different. Take a look at the base rogue abilities. We have Backstab, which now has an interaction with Find Weakness. I guess we should talk about Find Weakness first. It's now a passive for the rogue spec. It also is a talent for some reason, so this will probably end up... Oh, really just removed it. Okay, so... Find Weakness, you could basically double stack Find Weakness, but now you can't, which is hilarious. So we're going to take it to Weapon Master for now. But yeah, Find Weakness is going to be the base playstyle of Subtlety. Things are going to revolve around Find Weakness. When you proc Find Weakness with certain few abilities, you'll be able to bypass 30% of target's armor for 18 seconds. Baseline. So let's go back to the rogue abilities. Backstab if it crits, procs Find Weakness for 8 seconds. So Assassin, well, it looks like all 3 specs of rogue might actually end up playing crit heavy builds. For Outlaw, crit is good, for Subtlety, crit is really good, for the procs, and Assassination probably is good for the count points. Look, Shadows comes in while Eviscerate is still here. Eviscerate will now do extra shadow damage on a target with Find Weakness. For Subtlety in particular, Cheap Shot now generates 1 count point, so in PvP is going to be pretty nutty. It's going to make it a little bit harder for you to get those big Eviscerate setups, I think. Because 2 count points versus 1 is kind of massive. Then everything else here is the same, and everything here is the same. When it comes to the actual spec itself, what is new? Rupture comes back. There's no debuff with Rupture. You don't need Rupture, but you can use it on enemies if you want to. It's not like Nightblade anymore. If you need yourself some sort of a self-heal or anything, or a heal for, let's say you're PvPing and you miss that healing reduction, just put on wound poison in PvP. You want to slow? Nightblade used to get that. You got, you know, crippling poison. You got a slow, numbing poison, which I don't think should be able to be stacked, but maybe it is intended. I guess only time will tell. But we'll go instant poison for now. So, what Rupture and Nightblade used to do, Rupture is just there for damage if you want damage, but if you don't want to, don't worry about it. People love this ability. Shadowblade's still here, and it does exactly the same thing. Shadowlands is different. It's 1 minute cooldown, no charges, so it's a one big, long, 8-second duration for Shadowlands, and lots of damage buffs with your other talents, and those are getting shifted around a lot. Shadow Vault is another cool ability for subtlety that was added. And we will put on at least one dagger. I'll put both, just to show you. So this is your big AoE finisher. So you have an Eviscerate for single target, but Subtlety never really had anything for AoE. So now they have Shadow Vault. Finish a move that leaps you into the air, spray shuriken on all nearby enemies, dealing physical damage to targets, and you find weakness. Targets with find weakness suffer additional 50% damages shadow. It's like a AoE Eviscerate essentially. So I guess you would use it on maybe 5 or more targets. I guess if you were to take Eviscerate and hit a target with Fire and Weakness, see how much damage that does. If this ability does more damage than Eviscerate, then you would go with this for pure AoE. So if you were to, let's say, pull these two guys together, you would just AoE them a little. We'll try to see, we got Fire and Weakness here, Fire and Weakness there. That's what this ability is essentially a Whirling Dragon Punch from monks. It looks very similar in that sense, like the punches. But instead, it has this damage increase for AoE. I thought it would look really, really cool, but maybe Blizzard will end up changing the animation, like a big backflip or something. But still, yeah, that's an AoE for Assassination, which I'd say it's better than nothing. Gonna just kill these guys real quick. Now, let's continue on with the rest of the other abilities. We have Shadow Step, still 2 charges. Shadow Strike, still in the game, still requires that stealth and will teleport you to the enemy. Shiv is in the game as well. Shuriken Storm, if it crits, it procs Find Weakness on enemies. So, yeah, crit is going to be very big for Assassin. You have Slice and Dice, so you should be maintaining Slice and Dice at all times, like the good old days. Symbols of Death. 30-second cooldown gives you 40 energy, increases damage by 50%. Your next compound generator will critically strike. With how many abilities have a crit requirement for the Find Weakness, you will end up using this even without Dance in order to proc Find Weakness 100%. So that's essentially going to be the spec. Deepen in Shadows is a passive to get your dances back faster. Find Weakness, we saw that before. Master Executioner, Relentless Strikes, Shadow Technique. When it comes to your talents, we have Weapon Master in the first row with Gloomblade and a very secretive talent which we don't know about yet. Level 25, Night Stalker, Subterfuge, and Shadow Focus. This actually increases the duration of Shadow Dance by a second, so 9-second dances instead of 8. Shadow Focus could really be good in there too, but I find Night Stalker to be fine. You have plenty of energy to really get through all your abilities if you're running Vigor. But Deeper Strat together with Shadow Focus could also be really good. Level 30 tier, Vigor, Deeper Strat, Mark for Death. Nothing new there. Level 35, Soothe the Darkness, Cheat Death, and Elusiveness. Everything is standard. Level 40, Shot in the Dark. You got Night Terrors and Prey in the Weak, all standard. Level 45, Dark Shadow, which I think should be passive now. I think they might take this out of the game, but we'll have to wait and see. You got also Alacrity and Envelop in Shadows. Then you have Master of Shadows and Secret Technique, which has a 6 target cap. Again, they're trying to cap certain cleave abilities to like 4 to 6 or something. And Shuriken Tornado. So, what does Subtlety really feel like in terms of the gameplay? Well, we can just show you on the train down here. Shadowblades, get a Shadow Strike in there. Gonna make sure we get a Slice and Dice. We could get a full Rupture if we want to, because might as well. Pop Dance with Symbols of Death. We could just Shadow Strike. Actually, just Shadow Strike and Eviscerate, because we basically generate almost 4 common points, if possible. And this spec does quite a lot of damage. I feel like they're trying to basically just standardize the spec a little bit. Like, hey, Dance, that's your burst window. Not ability for you to Shadow Strike for sustain, but no, this is your burst. It is dedicated burst. Yeah, one of those. And the more common points you spend into abilities in order to get this burst back, the better. So you actually have a shorter cooldown than 1 minute. Maybe you can get it down to, I don't know, 30 seconds? We can actually try this here. We're gonna Shadow Strike and try to get as much damage as possible. Just trying to get through as many finishers as we can. I guess with Envelop and Shadows, you really could get some huge amounts of base damage here. Get it down to 30 seconds. So essentially, if you can get it a little bit shorter, you can line up with Symbols of Death every single time, or maybe a little bit earlier, actually. It looks like it's actually will line up a little bit earlier, but yeah, it's kind of crazy. Well, I guess you'll be able to, let's say, get set up. We get slice and dice rolling, right? Actually, no, it lined up more or less the same. More or less perfectly. Here we go. Get on the eviscerates back to back, and if this guy had more health than this, because he'll start evading soon, then I'll be able to get big damage on him right after. But yeah, that's subtlety more or less in a nutshell. It's still a little rough, and I think there's a lot of towns that are going to get changed up quite a bit, honestly. But we'll just have to wait and see what subtlety evolves, but this is subtlety. I think Assassination, Subtlety, and Outlaw are in the process of getting defined. They got some really interesting ideas, and certain mechanics might even be taken out before this is all is over. But it looks like Blizzard just wanted to store a bunch of mechanics that people used to love from back in the day, and kind of let the community decide whether they like certain things or not. Is Slice and Dice something that should come back to rogues? Do people like playing with Slice and Dice? Because it'll be something easy to balance, you know, extra auto attack damage and a buff for rogues to maintain. It's something they used to do way back in the day, so I would think it'll be easier even now. But I guess only time will tell. But this is where all rogues are at for Shadowlands as of right now. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I try to make it somewhat detailed, but then again, it's just first impressions, and I would love to test this out when they have more of a finalized version, like if I can do like a secondary pass on the rogue and see what everything looks like. But yeah, so far actually I'm not completely against any of the changes. I feel like Assassination is still going to be very base rogue. I feel the changes with Outlaw are actually quite interesting. I like the debuff and buff mechanic. It's like spinning plates, but if that makes us a consistent spec and do more consistent damage, and RNG of Roll the Bones hits us a lot less harder because of this playstyle change, then I'm okay with it too. I think a lot of people would enjoy RNG not being as master of a factor with Outlaw, or at least not as much of a punishing factor. Like RNG, oh hey, I got buffs, but not because you got, you know, you got the right buffs or the wrong buffs. Just having extra buffs is always good. It's always a damage upgrade no matter what. So overall, I think there's still a long room to grow for Sub and Outlaw to really get defined, but I think Assassination is going to be that spec that's going to be the easiest to manage. So if anything, if you guys get into the beta and you want to test out Rogue, I think Assassination is already pretty well defined. They're not changing much with it. The one thing I'd like to see for Blizzard to maybe consider is maybe giving Gouge to all specs of Rogue. I think that could be an insanely cool ability in PvP. But speaking about PvP, they haven't really even taken a look at the honor talents, so we don't really have anything new here yet. But hopefully we'll have something in the future. But thank you guys so much for checking out this video. I very much hope you enjoyed. I don't know if you guys were annoyed by those girls just yelling there while whacking each other with spears. Thank you guys so much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed. Let me know what your thoughts are about Rogue and where it's at. What are your thoughts on this first alpha update? Let me know. But thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see all of you in another video.